All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Ben Burton from NIST, and he's our pre-break speaker, so a very difficult role, and he's going to tell us about the phase diagram of the relaxers. So.
Okay, these are, oops, I have a pointer here, right? No, that's not what I want. Oh, this, okay. These are some of my collaborators, some sources of support over the years, and this is another effective Hamiltonian talk, modeling lead scandium niobate with divacancies, and also some work on PMN that's very similar to what Sergey showed you. Effective Hamiltonian can be divided into a piece that has to do, that treats normal ferroelectricity. In these cases, normal ferroelectricity wants to make ferroelectric phase along the 1-1-1 direction. And a piece that has to do with random local fields. So normal plus local field, and the local field part is what promotes the relaxor phase. So the model that I'm treating has these local mode pseudospin variables that have arbitrary orientation and some range of magnitudes. This is determined by the simulation. There are some short-range spin-spin interactions, and then there are some medium to long-range dipole-dipole interactions and random fields, and we do molecular dynamics on a 40 by 40 by 40 simulation cell. Jim. And for those of you who haven't seen this diagram, probably not very many, this is how we interpret the effect of the random fields. That is, some oxygens, because they are caught between, say, two scandium 3 pluses, are underbonded, and this attracts the unshared pair on the lead, and so it becomes unstable with respect to a displacement, and these displacements can go in various directions that compete with the natural tendency for ferroelectricity. So back in 2008, we published a paper on PSN, lead scandium niobate, with vacancies, divacancy pairs, lead and an oxygen divacancy pair. And we looked at 3 different kinds of cation configurations. This is perfect rock salt order on the sites. This is a random distribution, and this is nano-ordered configuration, that is small ordered bits in a disordered matrix, or a random matrix actually. I calculated, or approximately calculated, the Burns temperature and the ferroelectric transition, and this is the phase diagram that I drew. With a normal ferroelectric phase, what we call a relaxor ferroelectric phase, and the ferroelectric phase. Then I laid off the field for about 5 years. And while I was gone, people discovered T-star, a definite signature of complex lead-based relaxers, according to Takil et al., corresponds to a local phase transition. I don't like the terminology local phase transition because phase transitions are inherently features of infinite systems, but I think it's generally the right sort of idea. Now, also there was work by David Sherrington trying to apply spin glass Hamiltonians to treat relaxor ferroelectrics. And he did this in a way that, that gave him soft spins, that is, spins like our local mode variables that have arbitrary orientation and a range of magnitudes. And then he had a local displacement term here that might be big for some atoms and small for some others, as in barium titanate zirconate, so titanium would be allowed to flop around a fair bit and zirconium would not. And then random bonds that of unspecified length or range that that provide frustrated interactions, but no random fields, and not even for his adaptation to ENN. And he drew this diagram. I apologize that this faces the opposite direction from all the diagrams I've calculated, but you can invert it in your head. It shows a ferroelectric transition and what he calls a PNR phase, sort of an analogy to a superparamagnetic phase, and then a relaxor phase here. And so I was inclined to think that this sort of phase diagram topology might be more or less correct, like this vertical phase boundary, and that this would correspond to T star and this would correspond to Burns temperature. So I went back to look at the model. Oh, this is why I like this terminology, because up in what I would call the PNR region, our simulations seem to show very nice flopping around of more ordered regions, which are more polar ordered and more chemically ordered. And so I like that. And then at lower temperatures, below the T star, one would expect less mobility. So I went back and did calculations, and in fact these are the results, and these are the prototype phase diagrams. I found points corresponding to these asterisks. One wants to say asteroid, like hippopotami. But anyway, I found these points with some order parameters, and so I think this is what the phase diagrams should look like. I think they should be corrected. The order parameters I used are self-overlap order parameter that I found in a spin glass paper, and a temporal autocorrelation parameter. Now, this is just the dot product between the vector and itself. And this is the dot product between the vector at time I and its time, and at time, should be time t. Anyway, time t plus 100 snapshots. I take a snapshot every 100 time steps. So this is how the order parameters behave, and this is for the random cation configuration. At the Burns, below the Burns temperature, which was calculated independently in the original calculations, and seems to correspond to a minimum or something like it in this order parameter. This one is the Q size I parameter. And then at what I'm calling T star, things start to get interesting, and there starts to be an erratic behavior. Now this looks like, this is the ferroelectric transition as calculated originally, and it seems to correspond to a serious change in the order parameter. Curiously, we see something like the same thing here at about the critical composition where the ferroelectric transition goes to 0. So I hesitate to attach any significance to that. But anyway, this is a case where we go from the normal paraelectric phase to the PNR phase, where things are nice and smooth, and then at some point we go into the relaxor region, and then maybe you hit a ferroelectric transition at lower temperatures, or maybe you don't. So that's what gave me these points. The 2 points you just saw are here at the critical composition, and here at this composition. And maybe call this the relaxor ferroelectric, which has a ferroelectric ground state, and this just the relaxor. This is for the nano-ordered configuration that I showed you the simulation for before. So these red regions here are, this is actually showing the local fields, but the red regions here are the chemically ordered bits, and the disordered matrix is the blue. So that's what the microstructure looks like. And again, we see the same pattern of a smooth behavior of the self-overlap parameter, and then more erratic behavior in what I'm calling the relaxor region. Now, this diagram went a long way to convincing me that I had the right idea here with these order parameters. This is how Q delta T, that's the black diamonds here, behaves as a function of molecular dynamics time in the simulation. Now, the points that I plot here are actually averages over the last thousand snapshots up here, where it appears to be converged. Now, of course, you never know if it's converged. You don't know if this is going to go up somewhere else or not. But anyway, at high temperatures, things are nice and smooth, as shown here. But at low temperatures, that is when you cross this red line and you go into the relaxor region from the PNR region, you can see that the system is sampling local minima that it finds its way out of after a sufficient period of time. And so that went a long way to convincing me that these are not just fluctuations here. And you'll note that you can see the fluctuations in the width of these curves, and these look bigger than they otherwise would because they actually have symbols on them, whereas the other points don't. So you get essentially the same phase diagram then for the nano-ordered configuration. And now we've tweaked the model to do simulations of PMN, essentially because both PMN and PSN want to have the same kind of normal ferroelectric behavior of 111 ferroelectricity. All we've done is to use the PSN model for normal ferroelectricity and change the behavior of the random fields so that they represent the appropriate stoichiometry. And I've looked at nano-burgered configurations and random site configurations. The random site configurations are like the configurations Sergey was talking about. So you've got layers of 111 layers of niobium, pure niobium, alternating with layers that are 2/3 magnesium and 1/3 niobium, which are randomly arranged. And you can see it's much the same story as for PSN, that the order parameters go smoothly through the PNR region below the Burns temperature here. And then there's a transition. In the transition temperature, there's some variation in these 5 different replicas that I did for the random site configuration. Also, you notice that there's a lot more action in the temporal autocorrelation function. Whereas the temporal autocorrelation function was behaving in about the same way as the self-overlap parameter in PSN. So the suggestion is that things are changing more rapidly in PMO. And these are curves, similar curves for nano-ordered configurations with 25% ordered regions in disordered matrix, 50% and 75%. And as the degree of order goes up from 25 to 50 to 75, T star goes up as in Sergey's results and the Burns temperature goes up. And so we can draw a phase diagram by calculating the average magnitudes of the local fields. And these are the data, or the results that I've just shown you. So 25% nano-ordered, 50 and 75, and then the 5 random site calculations here. And the spread that you can see, this is akin to a finite size analysis. That you can't make an infinite, I can't make an infinite box and sample all of the possible configurations, but I can sample some of them and they all give pretty much the same results. And you can see we're getting essentially the same prototype phase diagram with this curve coming over towards what I've schematically drawn in as the ferroelectric transition. If Sergey is correct in that, sometimes gets into, and these random site configurations sometimes get a ferroelectric have a ferroelectric transition, then this curve should come down over here. I can extend this curve by simply reducing the strength of the local fields, but I haven't done that yet. So in conclusion, I've used these order parameters to find T star, and I think that works pretty well. I get consistent curves, those asterisks fall in reasonable curves, and that gives me a prototype phase diagram that's essentially analogous to what Sherrington said he expects from his models. He hasn't actually calculated, or I haven't seen a calculated model as far as I know. And so in spite of the very significantly different atomic models for what's happening, we use random fields. He just uses these local displacements and frustrated random bombs. We seem to get the same phase diagram, essentially. And here's a simulation. Do we have time for this? Yeah, I have time. Maybe I have to. Okay. These are simulations of the nano-ordered configuration.
That's one frame.
Yeah. Okay. Of the nano-ordered configuration, and this is at a temperature up in the PNR region. This is at a temperature down in the Relaxor region, and the black and white squares underneath represent the chemical order. Okay, so when you see a nice chessboardy kind of arrangement of black and white squares, as you see here, that's a chemically ordered region. The red and blue arrows represent the Z components of the local mode variables. So red is, I forget which is up and which is down, but one is up and the other is down. It doesn't matter, because you could turn the crystal around. And what you see is that even at rather high temperatures, represented here, that still the very ordered regions stay very polar ordered. And the matrix in between that's more disordered has most of the motion. And really you have very much the same sort of situation here at lower temperatures, except there's a lot less motion in general. So this is very similar to the model that Andrew Rapp showed you yesterday of the PNR staying about the same size because they're pinned to the chemical ordering, and not changing very much as a function of temperature. But at sufficiently high temperature, at sufficiently high temperature in the PNR region, their orientations change more quickly, and they are not as frozen in as below T star. Thank you.
We're coming up against the break, so maybe one question.
So about the movie, this one has too much detail to be appreciated from here, but the previous one, the one with the arrows. So I wonder, by which criterion you decide which arrows are blue, which arrows are green?
Oh, the blue arrows.
Yeah,
The blue arrows are chemically ordered regions,
yeah, but,
and the green.
and this has nothing to do with the orientation of the arrow. It's a further parameter which comes out from simulation. Or,
Yeah, that's when we set up the simulation box and where we put the atoms,
yeah.
where we put the niobiums and the scandiums.
And so,
So-
blue and red means different atoms.
These, well, it's not different atoms, it's that the atoms are more chemically ordered in here than they are out here. And they're, yes.
Well, maybe Ron has a last question.
No.
Can you compute the diffuse scattering, like X-ray scattering, to compare with experiment settings from the ordering?
Well, we did that with Ganesh, but it's a good point that maybe we should go back and recompute.
No, I mean for PMN.
Oh, for